All right, so you're going to the grocery store, you want to buy some eggs, you get to the egg section and there's like a million different options, right? You see all of these cartons, they're all labeled with different things: cage-free, organic, pasture-raised, farm fresh, all natural. What does it mean and which ones should you buy? All right, so when it comes to buying eggs, 95%, roughly 95% of the eggs in the grocery store would be considered conventionally raised eggs.
Yeah, so that's just your run-of-the-mill kind of factory farmed eggs, where chickens aren't really even viewed as chickens per se. They're more so like units of production, cogs in the wheel of the industrial system.
Yeah, it's to make a profit. They pack as many chickens into a small space as they can. So typically these chickens are raised, they're typically kept in what's called battery cages. So these confined cages with, on average, about 8 birds in these cages, where each chicken has roughly an iPad's worth of space to call its own. That's how tightly they are cramped in like sardines into these small spaces. So tons of chickens cramped in, not natural for the chickens yet, often called natural farm fresh eggs. These chickens are usually fed a diet of a mixture of corn and animal byproducts. I couldn't exactly figure out what that meant, animal byproducts, but that's what I found in terms of what these chickens were fed. So that is 95% of the eggs at the store. And so a lot of people are looking to buy better than that. They don't want to buy those eggs from those chickens that are raised in those really, really horrible, horrific conditions. And so it can just get really confusing. Then from there, what do you buy? So there are a couple words that are actually regulated when it comes to buying eggs. And so the regulated terms are cage-free. And so if you're buying cage-free eggs, that means there's a regulation on this from the government. That means the chickens have to have at least 1.2 square feet of space to call their own, and they are not in these battery cages. They're not confined in cages, so they can move around and they have at least 1.2 square feet of space.
Yeah, so it's an improvement over the iPad, right? 1.2, they can like stretch out their wings and
walk a little bit.
Walk a little,
yeah.
So,
but it in no way guarantees or likely does not mean they're having any access to the outdoors, to grass, to the sun, to anything like that. So
still confined, essentially.
Yes. Usually probably still in a big barn, just a little more space and without cages. Okay, so that's cage-free. Then if you go to the other regulated term, it is free range. So a free range chicken means that instead of having just the 1.2 feet of indoor space, they're also cage free, they're free to roam, and they have to have at least 2 feet of space outdoors that they can move around in. So they have to have access to the outdoors as well as being cage-free and can move about with 2 feet of space.
So there can be some benefits to that, right? They'll see the sun, which is great. Anytime you step outside, your mood, improves, and there's a lot of health benefits of just being outside and having access to the sun. They might be able to get some bugs. I don't know, 2 feet still not very much.
Yeah, and so generally from the research that I did, most of these areas or these farms that kind of are advertising as free range are still going to be pretty limited in what they offer. Not all of them, there are definitely exceptions, but for the most part, it's still going to be pretty confined. Often the outdoor space is going to be more like on a little screened in patio with cement ground or just dirt ground with a lot of poop. And so it's not most likely those free range eggs that you buy at the store are not probably going to be chickens frolicking on pastures eating bugs and grass. Like that's likely not what it means by buying free range eggs. They have to have 2 feet of outdoor space.
Likely the goal is profit, and so whoever it is raising the chickens are probably just trying to meet that standard on a minimum level and not like going above and beyond. And it's not like free range, the chickens are running around in a field all day long or something like that.
Yeah. So those are the two regulated terms. I guess then there is a third regulated term, which is organic. And so organic eggs means that in addition, so it's the same requirement as the free range eggs with they have to be cage free, they have to be able to move around, they have to have some access to the outdoors, and they have to be fed an organic feed. So free range eggs do not need to be fed an organic feed. They can be fed a conventional, GMO corn feed. Organic eggs must be fed, those chickens must be fed an organic feed and then have the other requirements that qualify as free range eggs.
Yep. So another step up, right? Better feed is obviously going to mean a better end product in your eggs. You're going to have less chance of, there's studies out there showing how much percentage of some of these chemicals and things that are used in kind of these GMO food systems actually make it into the food, and then the chickens eat that gets passed on to eggs, which gets passed on to us. And so organics, but definitely a step up.
Yeah, but then you see a whole host of other terms on eggs, right? You see pasture raised, farm fresh, all natural, and I'm sure there's many others. So what about these terms? Essentially, all of these terms are unregulated. So producers can put basically whatever they want on packaging. And so in their minds, if they think, well, this could be considered a pasture raised chicken, or this is our farm, so this is farm fresh. They can put that on the package. There's no regulation. No one's saying what farm fresh means. No one's saying what pasture raised means. These things sound really, really great, but there's not actually any regulation around them. So I don't want to say, I think there are a few good companies out there that sell eggs at the grocery store that, claim these things pasture raised. And I think they actually are legitimately working with, good farms with good practices, doing really good things. But in general, just because something says pasture raised, farm fresh, all natural on the package doesn't actually mean anything. And there's probably a lot of not really true or factual statements being made because it's basically up to someone's interpretation of what those things mean.
Right, because a factory farm is still a farm, right? And so if your chickens are raised in a giant warehouse or barn and they never see daylight and they're just living in really poor conditions, that's still a farm fresh egg, right?
Yep, fresh, all natural. Sounds good. So those are kind of some of the main terms when it comes to what you're going to look for and what you're going to see on packages if you're buying eggs at the grocery store. Some other just quick things that you might see, specifically in terms of their diet. So other popular things are omega-3 eggs. So omega-3 eggs typically just mean that the chickens have been fed a feed that includes flaxseed, because flaxseed is higher in omega-3s. So then because they eat more omega-3s in the flaxseed, that comes out in the eggs. And so typically the only difference between omega-3 eggs is the diet of the chicken, including some flaxseed. The other thing you might see on packages is vegetarian fed. So this sounds really good, right? Like a vegetarian diet, your chicken's eating like kale and Brussels sprouts or something. In reality, chickens aren't vegetarians. Chickens are omnivores. Chickens in their natural diet eat bugs and worms and even rodents and frogs and all sorts of living animals. So they're not naturally vegetarians. So a vegetarian diet basically means that the chickens are being fed corn with fortified with amino acids because they need protein. So they're getting kind of synthetically derived man-made amino acids instead of getting actual protein from animals, which would be what their natural diet is. So while vegetarian feed sounds good, maybe not actually any better in their natural diet to anything else.
Yeah. And if you think like a laying hen, the demands on a laying hen's body are really extreme. If you're popping out an egg almost every single day, that's like giving birth every single day of your life. And that takes so much energy, and protein is just a huge building block in that. So you want to have a really good source of protein for your laying hens, for them to be living a good life and frankly just laying good eggs.
Yeah. So When it comes to buying at the grocery store, like we said, there's better options and maybe not so good of options. So we hope this kind of helped break down at least what those different terms mean, so you can be a more aware customer when you go to the store and are purchasing eggs. In our opinion, it is always best, if it's possible at all in your local area, to find someone who raises chickens, a local farm, a local family who has backyard chickens, a homestead family. It's growing. Lots of more people are having chickens, and so finding some sort of local source of chickens is definitely going to be a better option.
Especially right now, because we haven't bought eggs from the store in a really long time, but we're hearing from a lot of friends, family, that eggs right now are just skyrocketing, primarily because of the avian flu that's gone around, and I think decimated a lot of these big factory farms, which again is another case against them, just because of the lack of resilience there is. If there is ever anything that targets those farms or spreads, that wipes out a ton of chickens all at once, instead of just small family farms or backyard chickens where you kind of have things spread out more and it's less concentrated in one central location. And so there's also really high inflation costs with feed and energy and all the inputs that go into raising chickens right now, so it's just more expensive to raise an egg.
Yeah,
and so
for anyone raising chickens.
For anyone. And so for us, that's just such a strong case for supporting the local family farms, and really getting to know your farmer, know the practices of how they're raising their chickens. And I think through that, there's just going to be more resilience, sustainability within our communities of having more local egg farms available.
Yeah, so what do you look for when you're buying farm fresh eggs? How do you handle these eggs maybe differently than you would eggs that you buy from the store? So there definitely are differences. First, like Jim said, when you're buying eggs from a farm, you want to make sure you talk to your farmer, even go visit the farm, go meet their chickens, go see what their setup is, make sure things look clean, that they, stay on their coops, that they make sure things are clean, that the chickens are getting access to outdoors and they can move around, just check it out. Oftentimes, I would say, 99% of the time, people raising chickens are doing it because they genuinely care about the food that goes into their body, the food that they're feeding their family, and these animals and the way that they're being raised. And so I've met probably no farmers actually in my life who don't care about these things.
Right.
And so most of them, I would say it's probably fine, but it's always just really good and fun to just go see it for yourself. So ask those questions. But when you're getting fresh eggs from the farm, so the first thing that always surprises people is they don't need to be washed. And so when a chicken lays an egg, it naturally has this coating on it. It's called the bloom, and it is what helps keep bacteria out of the egg. So it's like this natural, God-designed feature of the egg to keep it safe and healthy and protected. And so as soon as you wash that egg, you wash off that barrier, you wash off that coat. And it also, if you just take that egg and you stick it in the refrigerator, just the condensation and the moisture in the refrigerator is also going to do the same thing. It's going to, even if you don't wash the egg, it's going to get rid of that protective coating that's naturally built into the egg. And so this is why we don't wash our eggs. And really, so I have a dozen eggs sitting here. This is probably from the last day or two. Let's see, can you see them? They're clean. They're not dirty. There might be a couple tiny little marks on a few of them, but really.
And you can always wash them right before you use them.
Right
That's
before.
Something we do if there's a really dirty egg or something.
And honestly, if we have a really dirty egg, we'll just give it to our dogs. We'll just crack it and have it.
I'm the one who goes out and collects our eggs, so there's occasionally ones that I'm like, I don't want to eat that. They laid an egg on their roost and it fell into a big pile of poop, and it's just I'm just not going to bring that in our house. That's going to go out to the dogs, and So.
But for the most part, they're clean and they don't need to be washed. And so these sit on our counter, and they can sit on your counter for at least 2 weeks, just fine this way. And so I've heard the statistic that 1 day of an egg out on the counter is basically equivalent to kind of the shelf life of 1 week of that egg in the refrigerator. So they're going to spoil and go bad so much less quickly if they have that bloom on and are left on the counter than if they're actually stored in the fridge. So stored on the counter, unwashed eggs, great. That's a good thing. You actually want to look for that in your eggs. And so that's the first thing when it comes to buying farm fresh eggs. Some other just tips and tricks are, if you do have to wash it, you want to wash it in warm water, and that's because of that porous shell. So if you wash it in cold water, it can actually cause kind of the inside to shrink and cause the porous shell to be more susceptible to bacteria getting in through that eggshell, as opposed to if you wash it in warm water, which causes kind of what's inside to expand, and it's going to keep that more protective coating and allow less to kind of go through that porous shell. So we just find if you actually just soak your eggs for a couple minutes in warm water, and then you can just wipe them clean, super easy, no fuss, really easy process. So if you do need to wash your eggs, do that. I would say if you do wash your eggs, try to use those up right away within the next day or two, because as soon as they hit the fridge, the shelf life just goes down a lot quicker. And so those are the ones that you'll want to use up faster. I do think it's interesting that eggs at different times in their depending on how old they are, can be good for different purposes. So really fresh eggs are the best for like eating fresh, making scrambled eggs and whatever. Eggs that are more like a week or two old, those are perfect for baking. So the yolk will have had some time, the egg whites will have some time to just kind of be a little bit of a different texture, and it actually makes them really good for baking. And then if you have a little bit older eggs, say like 2 weeks plus, those are going to be your best eggs for hard boiling, because the shell is going to come off those eggs so much easier. So those are just some things to take note of, but honestly, we usually eat all of our eggs within probably a week, because we just go through them pretty quickly.
But as opposed to, we've heard like for grocery store eggs, like the typical time for an egg to actually travel to the grocery store is like a month minimum, 1 to 2 months, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, it's required. They have to, from the date that the egg was packaged, they need to be sold, I believe, within 30 days of that. But eggs aren't typically packaged the day that they're laid. Like it could be a couple weeks before they're actually packaged from when the eggs were laid. So typically, like store-bought eggs are on average already about 6 weeks old. All right, and then one last quick thing when it comes to buying farm fresh eggs is, what about fertilized eggs, or eggs that sometimes you might see like a little spot of blood in them? So totally normal. These things are totally normal. It does not mean there is a hatching chick in your egg. A little speck of blood is very, very normal to have in an egg. If it seems excessive, pitch that one. It's always good when you're cracking eggs to crack them in a separate bowl, just to double check, because you never know. And if you are a little unsure about something, like you think, maybe this has been sitting around a long time, I'm not really sure, is this safe to eat? You can always do the float test. And so typically eggs should sink to the bottom. And so if they, sink to the bottom, they are fresh, they are good to eat. But if an egg floats to the top, that means it is one you want to pretch. That one would not be good to eat. So if you're unsure, always try the float test. But for the most part, really pretty much we've never had any issue. We've been keeping chickens for 8 or 9 years with any sort of fertilized egg or even rotten egg. Like we've never had that happen ever, I don't think.
And as a farm that, sells and distributes eggs to other people, like if we have ones that we find are questionable, we're not going to be we're going to be setting those aside, at least for our consumption, and, checking them out, or maybe giving them to animals. We're not going to be like every once in a while we find a pile of eggs that's been sitting there for, we're not sure how long, because it was in some funky spot that we don't usually check. And so then we'll find it and it's like, oh, we don't know if these are a couple days old or maybe longer. So anything like that, we would always eat ourselves. We wouldn't give to anyone else, but. Yeah, so we hope that that's been helpful for you and just clears up some of the confusion around farm fresh eggs specifically, because there's so much language out there, and like a lot of the things you find in the grocery store sound great, like the all natural, cage-free, free range, like these things sound great, but it's really helpful just to be informed on what those actually mean and the conditions that those actually require kind of at a minimum standard. Really, our recommendation at the end of the day is to go out and find a local farmer and, you know, somebody even in your neighborhood with a backyard chicken coop. Try and find a good source of just, you know, healthily raised chickens and, you know, and eggs that you can
at the bare minimum, they're going to be so much fresher than anything that comes from the grocery store. You'll get those eggs within a few days of when they were laid as opposed to weeks. Yeah. And that's going to make a huge difference in the nutrient values and even just the taste. So
yeah,
can't go wrong.
Really the best bang for your buck and value that you could find out there.
Even if you think you're paying a little bit more than the store.
Yeah. So if you still have questions, go ahead and drop those in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. But thanks for stopping by the farmstead today, and we'll see you next time.